All right, hello everyone and welcome. My name's Tim. Welcome to my first video tutorial on Linux. I'm going to go ahead and start everything off in a Windows environment, which is very familiar to a lot of people. And we'll go over a few Linux commands. Most of the commands that I'll go over also will be available on macOS on your terminal. If you have macOS, I highly recommend installing iTerm2, which is a program and a terminal much superior to the stock macOS terminal, but I'll get into that later. So first, Linux, what is it? And what's its history? Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. This is supposed to be covered for the Linux Plus exam, so this is not just superfluous information. This is actually good for you to learn. It started off back in 1969 with a PDP operating system, which turned into Unix. And there's a lot of history into this. I won't go into all the details. But basically, you follow this tree down here. This is where you get Sun OS. I actually have worked on some Sun systems a very long time ago. But anyway, you follow this tree down from Unix. You've got FreeBSD, which branches out actually down into Mac OS. And Linux starts over here in 1991. So Linus Torvalds didn't want to, with a lot of educational people, did not want to continue paying for a very expensive BSD. So he developed his own kernel, which, let's talk about what a kernel is. So you've got your CPU, your memory, which is RAM and those things like that, disks, which is your spinning disks or SSDs, storage is what it's referred to a lot nowadays, devices, and you've got your keyboard, your mouse, USB sticks, and things like that. The kernel is the thing that actually talks to this hardware. It acts as a liaison or an API if you're coming from the development realms, an API between hardware and you, where you actually interact with the computer here. This could be anything, any type of software that you're running, but for our purposes, we're going to call this the operating system. This operating system can be anything. Linux, it can be Windows, it can be Mac OS. All of those, which we've just listed off, have their own kernels. The Linux kernel itself has a whole lot of different distributions and operating systems that we'll talk a little bit about. Mostly, there's the Debian and Red Hat, which as the two main ones. There'll also be Arch and a lot of other ones that we'll stick to the most popular ones, which is the Red Hat and Debian versions, which you probably will first experience those in Fedora and Ubuntu. And we'll get into that later. So this level up here looks like this in Windows. So let's talk about this here. So you've got your C drive that you'll see when you click on local disk or this PC. You see this local disk here. That's this. On top of that is your Windows, program files, documents, and settings. You'll find your username and then your desktop, your documents, favorites, all these things. And then some of these system files over on this side. This is called a file structure, and your operating system has this file structure. In Linux, it looks like this. You'll have your root partition up here, which encases everything. And on top of that, everything branches off. We're going to talk a lot about all of these, but for our purposes for this video, we're going to talk about the home folder, where the user files are. Very similar to this system here. So you've got your root, basically your home, these are analogous, root, home, and username. Very similar to root, home, and username. Not to be mistaken with user. This user folder is where your binaries and local things that your applications need to run. This is actually where they talk to. The home is where your My Documents will be, your downloads, those types of things. So your username is going to be off the home folder. But it'll be whatever your username is, home, and then your root partition, which is the very base of everything. So let's talk about what that means for you. How do you interact with it? If you've been looking into Linux, you've probably seen or talked about installing WSL, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux. Let's look at that. There's lots of different options. I went ahead and installed the 24.04 LTS version, which is the long-term support, is what the LTS stands for. Let's go ahead and open that up and see what that looks like. So this is your command line interface. This is your terminal prompt. This is a terminal application. More specifically, this is called a shell. Now, if you recall, looking at these pictures here, you have your kernel. The shell operates at like the base layer on top of the kernel. It wraps the kernel in a shell, quote unquote. And that software deals up on top of that. But right now, we're going to touch right directly near this kernel in our shell, which is this terminal. So let's go ahead and use this a little bit. So what's going on here? So let's start off with a library search or a list using the list command. And there's nothing here. This is brand new. I just installed it. So let's go ahead and make a file in here. Well, let's make a folder first. Let's make directory, and we'll call it foobar. We'll make another one. We'll push up on our keyboard here and push foobar 2. Let's make foobar 3. And now we list, and we have these 3 folders. So that's cool, but what does that mean? Where does it show up here? Where is this? So that's an excellent question. This here is a shell separate from your Windows. This is actually, the Windows subsystem for Linux is actually a VM that runs inside of your computer. So this is its own operating system, separate away from Windows. But we can actually go into the Windows side from here. So let's do that. Let's take a look at what we've got here. So we've got ls, shows our folders, right? But if you do a list all, it shows everything plus our hidden folders. And these 2 significant lines right here, the dot and the dot dot, those are directories or folders. To look at those, let's go ahead and list what's in the dot. Oh, that's interesting. So it lists just like as if I ran without it. So that dot, now we know, just means here. That dot just means wherever you currently are. And if you ever wanted to see exactly where you are, you can do pwd, which means print working directory, to see exactly where you are. So I am going from root or slash in the home folder and then my username. So I've gone down that tree. And let's pull that picture up again real quick so you can see visually. Here's root, which is that slash, home, and then Tilgith, which is my username over here. So I'm following this branch. So if I'm following this branch, it makes sense that I should be able to go backwards through it, right? Let's do that. There's a change directory command, which means I can change directory into any directory. So let's change directory into, look, now I'm in foobar, and my terminal even says exactly where I am. Let's make another directory. And we'll call it directory. And here we go. We can cd into that directory, which there's nothing in, of course. So let's go back to where we were using the cd command. And we do that by this other significant line here, dot dot. That means go backwards. So let's go ahead and go dot dot. Now I'm in foobar. So I can go cd forward into a directory and cd backward with the 2 dots. What happens if we do cd dot dot and then dot dot again? Well, let's find out. Let's do this from cd dot dot slash dot dot. Going back once, and then we're going back twice. So we should end up back in our home folder. And sure enough, we do. And there's our original foobar. So this is our home directory. our particular home folder. So let's go ahead and follow this back a little bit farther. And I'll show you why we're doing that here in a second. So let's go ahead and go back one more. And sure enough, here's home. So now we're in home, which is where all the user directories live. Which I'm the only user directory here right now. We could make a new person, but we won't do that yet. We're going to go into an actual Linux machine to work through that later on down in the course. But for right now, we're just moving around inside the file system. So let's go ahead and go back one more. We should go back and be in the slash. So here we are. We're in slash now, which is here. So that's cool. But that means we should see all these things, right? Ignore this. This slash include is not a thing. So, well, for what you'll see, anyways. Let's do a list about what's here. Sure enough, I see Etsy, home, media, all these things. I also see something significant that you probably don't know is significant yet, but this is the mount folder. This folder is actually where we can get to our Windows system from, because Windows is mounted to this so that it can run off of Windows. So let's go ahead and cd into mount. Change directory, mount. Oh, if I can type, there we go. So let's look at that. And here is WSL and our C drive. Let's go ahead and move into our C drive. And here's our program files and all these things that we would expect to find here. We are now in Windows, but we're using our Linux shell to do it. So let's go ahead and cd into users. And what's here? Let's do a library search again. Let's see a list. All users, default user, public. Oh, there's my username. Let's take a look at what that username is. Or take a look at what's in that username folder. And there's all my stuff. My documents, my cookies, everything. So we can even list it in a format that we like, or that I like. A little messier, but it shows ownership of the files. This is a ownership for the person and ownership for the group. So I have a Tilgith user and a Tilgith group, which is, it's a Linux thing. We'll go into that a little bit more later, but right now we're going to just move around in the file system. So let's go into our downloads and see what I downloaded here. Also, this is different from your Windows command line or PowerShell, where case matters. It matters more in PowerShell, not so much in the command prompt, but in command prompt, you don't have to care about case sensitivity. I could put a lowercase d and still have gone into downloads. Not so much with PowerShell or with anything Linux. Linux is very picky about your case. So if you can't get into downloads with lowercase d, that's why. So let's look. What's in here? A couple of I have some drivers that I downloaded for my laptop and some stuff here that I have for my 3D printer. Let's go ahead and take a look at, we have a look at all these executables. These don't mean anything to Linux, but say they did, say I downloaded something that I wanted for Linux, I can actually take that, whatever that is. Let's go ahead and take that and copy it. CP is copy. Let's go ahead and take my my Steam setup folder and let's move it into my home directory. So we're going to copy it from where we are here, and we're going to put it in and follow the path, right? So slash for root, and then home, and then username, and let's put it in foobar 3. What the heck? And let's see what happens. Let's list home Tilgith foobar3 and see what's in there. And sure enough, now we have a copy of my Steam setup execute program inside Linux. So let's go back over there. you don't have to type these full paths all the time. It does tab complete, which is nice. But if I wanted to just go back to my home folder, all I have to do is type CD, and that will take me from anywhere I am. So print working directory to show where I am. I'm in Mount C users, downloads. I can just type in CD, and it will immediately take me back to my home directory from anywhere I am. So I'm back in my home directory now, just in where we created those foobar files, or folders. So let's go ahead and look at foobar 3, and that certainly worked. We have that there now. But, like I said, it's an executable file. That only means something to Windows. It doesn't mean anything to Linux, because that's a Windows thing, an executable. We'll talk about that later. There are executable files, but they don't have the .exe. That .exe is a Windows thing. So we're going to just go ahead and get rid of that. So there's the remove command. So let's remove that from where we are, and it's gone. Now, let's say I wanted to go ahead and get it back. So all I have to do is copy, but I'm going to have to go through that whole path. Mount, if you remember, we have it here. Mount C users temp, and then downloads. And we want to copy Steam back over here again. Now, we're copying from this path, and we want to put it exactly where we are. So how do we do that? The dot. The dot means put it right here. And it's back. So hopefully that helps kind of demystify a little bit moving in and out of files in the command line. We'll go into a lot more about how this works in an actual Linux VM in the next video. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you there.